Good afternoon. My name is José Bonfim from FCT. I am the moderator of this session. These sessions, as you know, starts by a small intervention from a young, designated by Ciência Viva, António Rodrigues, who will address you quickly on his view on science. A very short intervention, please. Yes, from there.
Hello everyone, my name is António Rodrigues. I'm from AVET School of Almada. I study robotics and electronics, and I will talk a little bit about my experience on a project named CANSAT that I went with my team. Basically, what we do is we create a small satellite with inside of a can, like a soda can, and it has a lot of sensors. Then we have to code our dashboard, that is our ground station, where we receive the data that we collect from the CANSAT from antenna. We coded a lot to create the dashboards, to coding the microprocessor that is the brain of the CANSAT, and it's a very good opportunity to learn some coding, robotics, electronics, everything. And I like it a lot, and it opened some views to proceed some degrees in college. Thank you.
We have 5 communications covering the first one, international artificial intelligence in power, energy and energy systems. 2 communications on cybersecurity issues. 5th one on software that writes code, and the 5th one on artificial intelligence and deep learning or beyond deep learning. So you have 15 minutes per communication, 10 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for general discussion. Okay. On the 6th minute, it's not very nice, but that's on the rules of the game. I show to the person who is communicating a yellow card, and the 10th minute a red card, and I do not have any whistle, so it's not very nice this, but that's on the rules of the game. I will be discreet, I promise. So I invite you now, Tiago Pinto, for the first communication from the Grupo de Investigação e Engenharia e Computação Inteligente para a Inovação e Desenvolvimento. The title is Power, Energy Systems and Electricity Markets, an Artificial Intelligence-Based Approach. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tiago Pinto. I come from a research group called GICAD, which is a part of Polytechnic of Porto. And we are a research group that focuses on applications of artificial intelligence to solve several real-world problems. One of the big areas that we have is on power and energy systems, and that's the scope of this presentation. So, as you may be aware, we are living in an era of great change in power systems, mostly due to the large penetration of renewable energy, which is bringing a lot of changes in the usual operation of these systems. The main reason for that is that we need to keep at all moments the balance between the generation and the consumption. And before we had renewable generation, which is variable, which depends on environmental conditions, we could just control the generation in order to meet the expectations of the demand, and the balance is okay. At this point, the generation is varying all the time, so we need to find some solutions in order to keep this balance. One of the most obvious solutions for this is to use storage, right? So if we have extra generation at some points, we just store it and use it when we need it, when there is a lack at other points. And the problem is that at this point we do not have generation technologies storage technologies to enable us to do this at a large scale. One of the perspectives is also the use of electrical vehicles, which could act in the future as distributed storage. They have batteries, they move around, and we can use those batteries to store some energy and use them later as well by providing some incentives to the users, of course. But also this is some future perspective, is not something for today or tomorrow. So we must look at other perspectives, and the perspective that we are using at the moment and for the upcoming years is to look at the demand side and to try to get some flexibility from the consumption. So if we have generation that is changing, we need to keep the consumption changing as well in order to keep the balance between the both. So we have several programs all around the world directed to the flexibility of consumption, to demand response programs, which basically are incentives to provide to consumers so that they can provide some flexibility, change some of the consumption habits in order to help the system keep that balance. The problem is that in order for us to do that at a large scale, we need to look at large consumers, of course, but also at the small consumers, at the houses, at the small commerces. We need to look at the cities. So we are approaching a very big problem. We are not just looking at the power system as a big thing, as an overall thing, but we are looking at the very tiny consumers at the very specific problems. And at the same time, we need to keep the balance between those tiny consumers and the big system, the pan-European scale, the large wholesale markets. So we need to keep the balance between those and to guarantee the interaction between them. In order to implement these kinds of policies and the programs directed to this, as you may imagine, they have a very big influence on what is going to happen. We can cause blackouts, we can cause very big economical problems. So before we implement these things in practice, we need to find some solutions in order to test and to evaluate the potential impacts. So the way that we are doing that at the moment is through simulation. And in our case in specific, we are using simulation through the use of artificial intelligence in order to help us to modulate those problems, to study them, to test different types of interactions and approaches, and see what could be the impacts. So this is just an overview of some of the projects that we have ongoing. Some of them are European projects, others are national here in Portugal. And they are all directed to problems in energy, but to very specific problems. Some of them more to the market problem, how can the energy be transacted, how can it be purchased and sold. Some of them directed to the aggregation, how can we reduce the dimension of the problem instead of looking at each house individually, to look at a bunch of consumers that have similar behaviors and treat them as a whole. Some of them are directed more to the security and to those problems more directed to the physical infrastructure. So all of this is working together towards a common infrastructure that we are building in our campus that we are using for the simulation and emulation of the systems in order to test the impacts of the different models. This is a general overview of that platform that we are building. In this picture, we have a division in 4 layers. Starting from the bottom layer, we have a real-time simulation layer. The real-time simulation is basically a very big computer with a lot of simulation capabilities that we are using to put there some power networks, for instance, some models that we do not have in our labs. For instance, large-scale electrical vehicles. We can put them and simulate them through this large-scale simulation. In the second layer from the bottom, we have the real physical infrastructure. In this case, we have 3 buildings in the Polytechnic of Porto that we are using for our tests. They are equipped with different sensors and actuators, and in that case we can test the real impact of the simulation models and so on in practice. We can see what actually happens in the lights, in the air conditioning, in the energy inside the buildings. In the third layer from the bottom, we have the agents parts, multi-agents, which are basically like independent programs that enable us to test different entities. We can test different consumers, different generators, different vehicles, different aggregators, different players that participate in the market, like retailers or brokers. And we can put them together with the physical infrastructure, with the things that actually exist, and see how their interactions could be and what impacts they cause. And then on the top layer, we have the intelligent layer, which is basically all the decision support, the machine learning, the forecasts for the prices, the forecasts for the generation, the optimizations for the resources. So all of that intelligent part is in that layer. This is another view at the multi-agent simulation. So we have the agents in the middle, and we have the interaction between the small players, the houses, the consumers, the physical resources, and the electricity market part, which can be a wholesale market, which is a large scale, or smaller markets. And all of that connected to the decision support in which we help the players that act in this environment to get the best outcomes out of their participations. So, looking at inside the house, we are developing a simulator which is called SHIM, SCADA House Intelligent Management, which is a simulator for controlling the loads, the generation, the consumption, and so on inside the house. So we basically look, first of all, we acquire data from the sensors that we have. Then we treat that data to find patterns in user behavior, to find correlations between behaviors, to find predictions of prices, of generation, of consumption. And then after reaching the decisions, we have the final part, which is the actual control, the actuation, which can be through the form of recommendations, for instance, to recommend a consumer to change his consumption at a certain time, or it can be actual control implemented directly. Then we have the market part. We have a simulator for the electricity market, where we have the main agents that participate there. We have the sellers, that are the generators that sell energy in the market. We have the buyers, which are the consumers that buy energy. We have the aggregators, that are entities that can represent a large number of consumers or generators. Then we have the system operator, which is the entity responsible for evaluating the impact on the actual network, to see if those transactions that are agreed between the players, if they are possible to be implemented due to the grid restrictions. And then we have the market operator, which is the agent that controls the market itself, that defines the market price, the transactions, and so on. Then we have other systems that are specifically directed to the decision support. In this case, this is ADEM. This is a decision support system for the transactions in the market. It basically helps the players deciding how to negotiate their energy in the market. It is composed by several subsystems as well. One of them directed to the planning. So sometime in advance, we are going to look at the market opportunities that are available. We are going to analyze those different markets to try to estimate the prices that are expected there, to forecast those prices. And then depending on that, we are going to optimize the participation of a certain player in that group of markets. Then we have some systems directed to the decision support in auction-based markets. So when we are negotiating through auctions how to place the bids to get the maximum revenue from the sale of energy or the lowest cost from the purchase of energy. Then we have another system directed to the decision support in bilateral negotiations, when players are negotiating directly with each other, how to decide which players to approach to negotiate with, and then after starting a negotiation, how to place proposals and counter-proposals in order to reach the best contracts, the best prices in that contracts as possible. And then we are putting everything together through an approach like this, which has ontologies in the center. Ontologies are like a language, like a representation of the domain. So what we are doing is like defining a new language that the agents, the computers can understand. And in this way, we can have the different systems, all of them directed to specific problems, communicating with each other and working towards a common goal. So in this case, we can do some specific simulations just for the market, just for the house, just for a smart grid, or we can put everything together and see what is the impact from the inside of the house, from one lamp until the wholesale market and at the big pan-European scale. This is just a very brief example of what we can do with this type of solutions. This is a power network from Portugal, from the north of Portugal. And what we have done here is we took this real network and we put there some scenario defined by us, which includes several consumptions, several buildings. All of these buildings are real buildings. Some of them are measured in real time. For instance, those buildings that we have in Porto, we are measuring the consumption in real time when we are putting it here. Other houses are measured some time ago. For instance, one of these houses is my house that has been measured 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I measured the consumption throughout a certain time, and then we put the consumption here, and we see what the network works like if my house was there. And then we have other houses that are located far away. For instance, we have some houses in Germany that we are measuring the consumption in real time as well, and we are putting it here and simulating as if that house in Germany was here. And we have the same for generation, for electrical vehicles, and for the other stuff. What we can do here is, for instance, look at the network as a whole and try to optimize those resources in common. So we look at the global generation that we have. In this case, we just have solar generation. We look at it and try to reach some actions to do in the network. And then, depending on those actions to the general network, we can look at each house in detail and provide some specific actions to that house. For instance, to reduce some consumption at peak hours of consumption, or to shift the washing machine from 8 in the night to 10, some things like that. And then we have the actual control, which based on those decisions we can act and actually implement what those actions should be. This is just the interface of that control. So I'm just going to leave you with some challenges that we're facing right now in research directed to these areas. Some of the challenges are related to the data correlation and big data. So we are dealing with a lot of different sources of data: generation, consumption, humidity, temperature, luminosity, and so on. How to reach those correlations between data is a big problem. The execution times to reach decision support fastly. So we need to decide right now what to do 2 minutes from now. So we need algorithms that are able to perform good and fast. We have the problem with the Internet of Things, so how to connect the algorithms with the actual infrastructure and the communications between them. We have the problem with large-scale simulation. If you want to look at different houses, a lot of them together, how to do proper simulations together of a large-scale problem. We have the problems with security and privacy, not only with data, but also with communications. And we have the problems with trust and with the explainability, which are closely related to the recommendations that the systems can make. And me, as a consumer, as a house, why am I going to do what the system is telling me? Why should I trust the system? So if you can explain me or not, why is giving me some type of recommendation? So that's it. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions.
Invite the audience to raise questions or any reflection about what has been presented. Not being an expert myself, but I think it's clear that your research applies to energy complex systems,
Exactly.
independently of the scale. At first part, it appeared that it could be applied to smaller scale systems, but by the end of the presentation, I see that it may cover and apply to big systems. Okay?
Yes, exactly. Yes, we have been working on this type of problems for many years, and the difference between 15 years ago and now is that 15 years ago we could look at problems independently from each other. We could look at the small-scale problems and we could look at the large-scale problems as independent problems, and we could go deep in the studying of those problems independently. Nowadays, we cannot do it, so everything is connected, and everything has influence on each other. So if we want to study the market, we need to study the house. If we need to study the house, we need to study the market, because the behavior of the consumer is going to be dependent on the market price, which is a large-scale price, right? So what we are doing now is to put everything together and to go from the small problem to the big problem and make it a unique problem, interconnected of the several parts.
More questions? I noticed that you mentioned on the bottom of one of the slides your lab home or home lab.
Yeah.
It's from your center? It was
Yes,
developed by
yes.
your center?
Exactly, yes. In our center, we have 3 buildings that we are using as a lab, and we are measuring the different types of information there. We have some control, and also we have one lab that is simulating or emulating a house. So we have the different types of loads there that represent the air conditioning, the lights, the different types of loads there, and we can test our solutions in that emulated lab. So we can see actually things happening in that controlled environment.
Is there any further question? You made a signal? No? Okay, the visibility from here is
No, it's not
not that easy. So, thank you so much.
Good.
And now we move to the The second communication by Isabel Praça from Grupo de Investigação em Engenharia e Computação Inteligente para a Inovação e Desenvolvimento. O título é Cybersecurity, title is Cybersecurity and Data Analysis, Challenges and Use Cases. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. With this presentation, I would like to talk mainly about the challenges and some of the use cases we are addressing in some of our projects where we are using artificial intelligence techniques to deal with some problems related to cybersecurity, in particular in those related to critical infrastructures protection and also to industrial systems. I start with an overview of the projects I'm talking about. These are 3 projects that are recent projects in our research group. The first of them, SafeCare, deals with the protection of critical health infrastructures. Satye, that deals with the protection of airports, another kind of critical infrastructure, and Cyber Factory, which is a project that involves other partners from Portugal, in particular other SMEs that are facing these new problems with the increased digitization. To start raising some of the challenges we are now facing, I would like you to think that nowadays all the objects, all the environment around us is a cyber but also a physical world. We have the smart cities with sensors, with intelligent applications, with traffic, with light traffic management. We have intelligent houses. We have even ourselves using a set of intelligent devices that monitor our health or our states and try and give us some information. So this is nowadays physical and cyber worlds are most linked, and this is what some authors now call the age of sci-fi. Indeed, as we can see, a lot of companies, also the European Commission, from several years now on, they are raising this awareness and creating calls specific to deal with the cyber and physical convergence and the way they bring new opportunities for attacks and how can we deal with that. Indeed, we now need to monitor the systems that we use to monitor our physical and safety security. Indeed, some attacks are being done by the video cameras we use for our supervision, and so this introduces a lot of challenges. Regarding the projects I've announced in the first slide, let's focus a bit more on smart hospitals, smart airports, and on cyber factories. A smart hospital relies on optimized and automated processes within an ICT environment and with Internet of Things devices to improve the patient's care procedure and to introduce new capabilities. There are a lot of assets in a smart hospital that go since the remote care systems to identification systems, networking equipment, the buildings themselves, the mobile client devices, and some networked medical devices that may be sources of breaches. A smart hospital deals with all these kinds of assets to follow its objectives of an improved diagnostics and surgical ability, seamless patient flow, remote medical care, enhanced patient safety, cyber resilience, and trustworthiness. This is a critical infrastructure with several challenges, and the project we started last September, almost 1 year ago, it deals with the solutions that will improve physical and cyber security in a cost-effective way. So we will provide a set of capabilities focusing on certain innovative elements to optimize the protection of critical infrastructure under operational conditions. This project is coordinated by the Hospital of Marseille in France, and we have pilots in 3 hospitals, Marseille, AMC, the Amsterdam Hospital, and in Turin Hospital. It is coordinated by Airbus Cybersecurity, and there are a set of partners that provide us the needed knowledge and competencies from medical devices to remote patient care to public institutions like we can see in this slide. What is the approach? The approach is to share best practices between security actors and health actors, to focus on analysis and learning to create a protection system, to provide a decision support with an integrated approach, to design, test, validate, and demonstrate certain innovative elements, to raise awareness and to create a protection system that can provide threat detection and mitigation across not just the hospital itself, but also across the population. Also to disseminate the results and the best practices. Again, going into this direction of the cyber-physical convergency, some of the use cases we are dealing now, besides the traditional ones, mostly focusing on the cyber side of the breaches we can find in a smart hospital, are now including the cyber-physical view. On some of these examples are use cases we are dealing with in this project: cyber-physical attack targeting power supply of the hospital, cyber-physical attack to steal patient data in the hospital, and a cyber-physical attack targeting the population, the IT systems, and medical devices. These includes not just the typical analysis of network and host systems to detect intrusions, but a comprehensive approach where we can correlate events that come from the physical world, from the building itself, to the IT systems. In this project, we at ISEP and GCAD are working on machine learning for anomaly detection using different techniques and a set of technologies like TensorFlow, scikit-learn to test the best approach to include in a simulation platform that is based on a cyber range. And also we are working on alerts correlation between the building infrastructure and the cyber monitoring. For the smart airports are another critical infrastructure, again, with the need for higher levels of security and safety, with an environment that includes the land side, the air side, the buildings, and the IT infrastructure. This brings, in this environment, there are a lot of smart components and a lot of IT functions. And the goal here is to provide a toolkit to improve cyber-physical correlation, forensics investigations, and dynamic impact assessment at airports. So at the end, what we will provide is a new generation of a security operations center to be included in a comprehensive airport security policy. This project is coordinated by the German Aerospace, DLR, with pilots in 3 airports, Milan Airport, Zagreb Airport, and Athens Airport, again with a consortium that provides competencies that go from the baggage handling system to the passengers ticketing system, etc. And some of the use cases we are considering, again, besides the typical ones that mostly focus on the cyber side of the problems, We deal with the cyber physical attack targeting passengers' security, disturbance of the passengers' control zone, and compromising of the airport operations center. In this project, our role here is to use ontologies for systems interoperability and to proceed to the forensics analysis, which implies the need to analyze complex events from different time scales and to correlate them to investigate what has provoked an accident. And now to the industrial side and the cyber and physical side of industry. We had a talk this morning that also had some view on the evolution of industry towards what now we call Industry 4.0, where a set of game changers like cloud manufacturing, big data analytics, augmented and virtual reality, IIoT and M2M communications, autonomous and collaborative robotics, and additive manufacturing make a huge difference from the previous Industry 3.0. And talking about protecting industrial systems is not just talking about protecting SCADA. Indeed, nowadays, when we talk about an industry, a factory, we are not talking just about protecting the IT systems, the technology, the ICT technology, but also the OT part of the factory, the operational technology. And there are a set of enablers of these two different views. From the OT cybersecurity, we need to deal with the controllers, PLCs, SCADAs, also with sensors and other embedded systems, while at the IT level, we deal with the traditional TCP networks and so on. Just to jump very quickly, almost to the end, in this other project, we will provide a set of capabilities to promote optimization and resilience for the factories of the future. And I would like you to have these dimensions. We work in 4 dimensions, the technical dimension, economical, human and societal dimensions, and provide capabilities from the modeling and simulation to product optimization and resilience. Here to say also the human collaborating with machine and the security and safety issues that might bring are also our view. Portuguese consortium focus on paving the way for a new generation of ERP with some level of awareness about security and its correlation to the factory environment. And these are the techniques we are using and the capabilities we want to deliver. Just to finish, I don't resist to keep some key challenges to face these critical infrastructures protections, like the need for safety and security convergence, securing industrial Internet of Things, intrusion and anomaly detection on industrial control systems, manage cyber-physical threats, manage behavior and organizational changes, and security, assure the security through the value chain. Yes, and it's done. Sorry that I was a bit over the time. Thank you.
For your very comprehensive and dense but very clear presentation. And now I turn to the audience. Yes, there, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I know that there is a directive from the European Commission about cybersecurity, and that that directive has been transposed to the national legislation recently. And I was listening to you and asking myself, first to congratulate about the initiatives you are doing on this important issue. But I was thinking as Europe considers this is so important, and not only Europe, the world, if there is some kind of coordination to avoid overlapping of initiatives from the hundreds of thousands research centers all over Europe, because the overlapping should be avoided. The second thing is if there is some financial support from the Commission on those initiatives. Thank you.
Starting from the first question, so if there are some overlapping of research in Europe, I guess there are, as there are in some of the other areas. What I also know is that in these calls, the ones that I have applied and the ones these projects were funded are focusing on the protection of different critical infrastructures, and also with a set of partners that, of course, are not overlapping themselves in the same project. Also, there was an initiative from the European Commission with a call from last year, April 2018, to build a network of cybersecurity centers. So where 4 projects were funded to make a clear collaborative network within Europe from the research in cybersecurity point of view. In one of the projects, we have the National Security Office as a partner. So I guess that will bring us some awareness of what is happening, and will also avoid that kind of too much overlapping that will not promote going forward in a quick way. That's important in this field. The second question was about the national support funding. These projects I've presented, 2 of them are European projects, so funded by the European Commission. The third one, Cyber Factory, has national funds through Portugal 2020 program and Innovation Agency. And also, I should say that in all the applications, although not providing a specific funding, but always trying to support the Portuguese participation in European calls for cybersecurity, we have the Cybersecurity Office, the National Cybersecurity Office, supporting all the applications that are done. There are no specific, at least to the best of my knowledge, there are no specific calls for cybersecurity in the national applications, but they are one of the areas of the national strategy, and I should say this experience while submitting the Cyber Factory went very well.
Any further question? So I also retain that we need systems to monitor the systems that monitor. That's good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you move to the next communication by Miguel. Thank you. By Miguel Correia from UNESCO Lisboa, ID Lisboa. On the team cybersecurity breaches, the day after made easier. That's challenging.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. I can't see anyone, but I guess you are there. So the title is a bit weird, okay, but it only made this title to make it more appealing, okay, but the talk actually is about intrusion recovery, okay, about recovering from intrusions that happened and compromised the state of a system. And this is joint work with David Matos, who was my PhD student until a couple of weeks ago, and Miguel Pardal, who is my colleague at Technical. And let me start with some motivation, of course, and of course the motivation is the usual one in cybersecurity talks, okay, about intrusions and things that go bad, okay, and attacks that happen, they cost a lot of money and so on, okay. And probably you heard about WannaCry a couple of years ago, and then there is a recent piece of news from last month saying that it's still attacking a lot of systems today, Actually, it's not the original WannaCry, it's a variant of WannaCry. And there is a more recent piece of news that a couple of cities in Florida were attacked using ransomware, and they had to pay a lot of money, $500,000, to get their data back, and so on. Okay? And then there are zillions of this piece of news that I could put there. Okay? And maybe 10 years ago or so, I was working in an area that tried to deal with this, called intrusion tolerance. And then people started calling it Byzantine fault tolerance, but it's essentially the same. Who tried to apply a paradigm from an area called fault tolerance or dependability to the cybersecurity area. Okay? And the idea, of course, was to do the usual cybersecurity stuff. Okay? You protect systems, you put barriers, you do access control, and so on, all the things that we do today. But then accept that things can still go wrong, okay? And they do, as we see. Okay? And then we put additional mechanisms to tolerate these intrusions. And an example is here. Okay, so we have 4 servers that are replicas. Okay, they are running some service. I don't know, a DNS, a name service, whatever. And we have some clients at the bottom that are making requests to this service that is replicated. Okay, and then we create mechanisms so that if there is a hacker that manages to exploit a vulnerability in one of the servers and to cause an intrusion, the system as a whole still behaves well because we have some sort of protocol running there that allow us to keep the integrity and availability of the system. Okay? And so we did a lot of research. We and many people did a lot of research about this through the years, published lots of papers. And then maybe 10 years ago or so, we started trying to deploy this in practice, and companies would say, this is very expensive. You need 4 servers instead of 1 server. We don't have money for this, and so on. Okay? And then, interestingly, one thing happened called Bitcoin, okay, and blockchain. And suddenly, I don't know if 4 servers are still expensive, but then Bitcoin today has around 10,000 servers scattered through all the world. That is what is shown there in the picture. Okay, the picture has a couple of months, I think. And so suddenly, it's not expensive anymore. Okay, but anyway, maybe 10 years ago or so, I was a bit tired of all this fight. This was not being employed because it was too expensive and so on. Okay? And actually, this BFT replication idea outside from blockchain is still barely used today. And so I got interested in the idea of doing recovery because that's what actually companies do. Okay? They do the best that they can in terms of cybersecurity, or sometimes not the best, but they do something about cybersecurity, and then they are attacked. And then where they are attacked, they have to recover the systems, and they do it manually. Okay? There is a poor guy called database administrator or system administrator that goes there and by hand clears the state of the system. Okay? And of course, this was possible some years ago. Today, it's extremely difficult when you have big data and cloud computing and this sort of thing. Okay? So we got interested in this idea of automatic intrusion recovery. And the idea is to revert the effects of attacks, and revert the effects of attacks on the state of the system. Okay? You have some system that has some sort of database on the background, and this database gets compromised by an attack. Okay? And we have to clean it after the attack. Okay? And of course, we have to clean it by keeping legitimate state changes. Okay? So it's not like, well, we have this system was attacked yesterday, we have a backup from 1 week ago. We put the backup, it's clean, perfect. Okay, not perfect, right? If there was 1 trillion accesses since then, we lose everything. Okay, we lose 1 week of work is too much in today's systems. So we have to identify, so instead, we have to identify the things that were corrupted and clean those ones. Okay, for that, we need logs of all the requests that were done, all the access that were done to the databases, and we need checkpoints, of course. And then we do some cleaning of the system. And recently we worked on this in the context of cloud computing, okay? So this is a complex picture about cloud computing. I'm not going to explain it, okay? But just consider that in the bottom you have, I don't know if this, no, it doesn't show. Okay, in the bottom you have infrastructure, okay? You have virtual machines, hardware, and so on, okay? In the middle you have services, databases, and so on. And in the top, you have software as a service applications like Gmail or Google Drive or things like that. Okay? And what we did was to design a set of approaches and systems to handle, to do intrusion recovery at different levels. Okay, we did ROCFS for file systems. So if you have files that are compromised, we can recover them with ROCFS. We did NoSQL undo to recover from intrusions in NoSQL databases. And we have 3 for applications, okay? Shuttle, Rectify, and Microvarm. Okay, they are quite different. So Shuttle was the first design. It involved modifying the applications, okay, for reasons that I will explain afterwards. Rectify was the second design, and actually the one that I'm going to explain next, that avoided changing the applications. And Microvarm is the most recent one, and it's about microservices, so I'm not going to talk about this today. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Rectify, actually. And so Rectify is about black box intrusion recovery. Okay, so we don't want to modify the application. Okay, why? Because modifying the application is complicated. Okay, you can have an application like MediaWiki. Okay, it has, I don't know, 1 million lines of code, 10 million lines of code. I don't know. Okay, and modifying them is complicated. So we want to avoid this. Okay, so Rectify, so it's a recovery service or an approach for recovering services designed for platform as a service applications. It does not require modifications to the applications. Okay, but I'll show that this is actually a challenge, and it actually involves linking application requests with database statements. Okay, I'll show it in the next slide. Okay, so, and actually for explaining this slide, it would be good to have a pointer. Okay, I have a pointer. Okay, okay. So am I in 9 minutes? No, less than 8. Okay. Okay. So if you see at the bottom, you see HTTP requests getting to the application. Okay, and then we have web server or web or application server in the middle. In the middle, yes, and at the bottom you have the database. Okay. So the user interacts with the system using HTTP requests, and then each HTTP request generates some statements to the database. Okay, and this is the state of the application. Okay, we assume that this is the whole state of the application. Okay, this is the thing that is compromised. And to recover, normally we want to look at the high-level operations. Okay, the attacker did this operation or that operation. That's what we detect. But then we have to clean the database with the statements that were done at the bottom. Okay, and so we need to map one to the other. Okay, and this is not trivial. Okay, because there is no clear linking between the two. If we can modify the application in the middle, then this is easy. Okay, because you just put a tag. Okay, so this was request number 1, number 100, number 200, and so on. Okay, so without that, and I'm going to jump over a few slides, we need to use some kind of machine learning scheme. Okay, so we have to run first a learning phase in which we learn about the association between certain requests and certain statements done to the database. Okay, for instance, when you do a register request, then there is something that happens in the database. When you register a new user, for instance. When you log in, something happens to the database, and so on. Okay? Then, in normal operation, you just log things. Okay? You log all the requests, and you log all the statements done to the database. And then, during recovery, you have to classify. Okay? Actually, this slide shows it better. The system administrator has to find somehow the applications that were malicious, and he has to understand what were the statements that were done in the database in consequence of those. Okay, this is what is shown here. Okay, the process is more or less complicated, and I don't have time to explain it. Okay, and then there is some certain compensating statements that are created to issue in the application database. Okay. Of course, there is lots of tricks to do this and so on. Okay, okay, just 10 seconds to explain that we did a long experimental evaluation with this, with actual applications that we did not modify. Okay. Of course, there is some logging overhead because we have to log all the requests. Okay, from 10 to 20% or something like that. Of course, storing requests costs space, and so in clouds it costs money. Okay, but security is not for free. Okay, usually people tell me, oh, this costs money. Yes, it costs money. Security costs a lot of money. Okay? And then the total time to recover, it depends. Okay, for one request, just 12 seconds. For 1,000 requests, it's about 16 minutes. Okay, it takes time. So last slide, okay? So I very quickly talked about intrusion tolerance, which may be the future, but it's certainly not the present, although blockchain is getting some sort of acceptance, okay? Then what companies do is intrusion recovery, but they tend to do it manually, okay? And so we have been investigating automation with some systems like RockFS, MicroVerm, and Rectify. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. Questions from the audience, please?
There's one there.
Thank you. The question I'm going to put is not so connected with the presentation you did. It was expanded. But at a certain point, you said that cybersecurity costs money, and that's true. My question is that if there are incentives that I think there aren't for the companies, being services or industry or whatever, air security, to invest on cybersecurity, because when there are breaches in the system, that costs a lot. This can happen, disaster things can happen, crashes of aircraft, data lost of banks and things like that. So I think it should be, I don't know if there exists already, a kind of regulatory authority for cybersecurity to check for the investments made for the several players in the market in order to guarantee the minimum security that can be provided nowadays. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the nice words. Okay. There is no such authority. Okay, there are authorities related to cybersecurity. In Portugal, the CNCS, right, Centro Nacional de Cibersegurança, and GNS, okay, o Gabinete Nacional de Segurança. They don't do this kind of checks. Okay, and security is a funny thing because there is no much incentive to do it. Okay, there are disincentives for not doing it. Okay, okay. So as you said, there are breaches. And there is this new factor called the GDPR, right? The General Data Protection Regulament, how to say it in English? Regulation, okay? That is starting to generate some increase, some great multas. I forgot the name in English also. Fines. Okay, for instance, yesterday there was some news about some huge fine to the British airplane company, that I forgot also the name, sorry. That was the price of a plane, okay? So it was a huge fine, okay? So if it is, and so related to the GDPR, there are institutions that are checking, right? So for instance, in Portugal, CNPD is checking, okay? And CNPD already made some hundreds of fines in 1 year of GDPR. Okay, so it started with a big one to a larger hospital that basically had everything open to everyone to see, and there are many others. Okay, but not for security in general. Okay, but for security related to the protection of personal data, there is GDPR. Okay, that generated these huge fines, and so they are checking. Okay, but not generically for security in general for anything. They are actually not checking for if the security controls are in place. Okay, they are checking if there is some problem. Okay, and then they give these fines.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you. I really enjoy your presentation, but I would like you to ask one question. Don't you think you should consider security by design when you're talking about cyber?
Certainly, yeah. So, yeah, when I talk both about intrusion tolerance and intrusion recovery, normal people make this kind of comments, okay? And I agree entirely, okay? But what happens is it doesn't work, okay? So, of course, people that do security by design, they try the best that they can, okay? And then, but few things tend to fail because systems are extremely complicated. There are vulnerabilities. This is more or less unavoidable, okay? For instance, if you think there was something that for many years we believed that was almost 100% secure, okay? Intel CPUs, okay? In Intel CPUs, we trust, okay? The problems were in software. And then suddenly, in the last couple of years, there were many, many vulnerabilities being found in Intel CPUs just because people started looking at them, okay? So security by design, I agree, it's a must, okay? But we are talking, my research specifically is about living with bad things that happen, even if systems are very well designed, which they should be, okay? And even this approach does not work very well if there are too many vulnerabilities, okay? It's good if there is one or two vulnerabilities that appear from time to time, okay? But if there are many, okay, then there is no recovery that is possible, okay? Because I'm doing lots of assumptions about the things that can be attacked and the things that cannot be attacked. In intrusion tolerance, I'm making assumptions about how many components can be attacked and others that cannot, okay? So security by design is a must, yes, for sure. Thank you.
So, I retain as a main idea from your presentation that from tolerance to recovery. Do you agree?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. That's clear. Okay, so you will have on the end of the communication the opportunity to make general comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
For providing better after days. And now we move to the fourth communication. The authors are Luís Caires, João Costa Seco, Nuno Preguiça, Teresa Romão, from Nova Laboratory for Computer Science and Informatics. The team is software that writes code and something more. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is João Costa Seco, and this work is joint work with Luís Caires, Nuno Preguiça, and Teresa Romão. So this is a line of research within Nova Links that aims to push a new agenda on programming paradigms. So let me start by motivating why do we need a new programming paradigm. We all feel that digitalization is in high demand today. Every day we see a new app from airplane companies to supermarkets. Everybody has an app, and the ones that don't have an app want an app, right? So behind an application on our mobile phones, there are systems running in the cloud with lots of data, personal data, and the demand for reliable and secure software is also high, even higher, as we have seen from the previous presentation. Who develops software assumes that the systems work reliably, but then they have to provide software systems that themselves do not introduce errors, do not leak data, do not corrupt data. So companies are leveraging on the immense computing power nowadays, from big data centers to our cell phones. Everything works together to build this ecosystem. So also businesses are pushing for faster development cycles. I don't know if you know that, but if you go on Facebook twice a day, you're probably using 2 different versions of the software. Big companies are deploying versions multiple times in one day. And also, we need to leverage on the immense amount of data that is lying around, collected from our cell phones, for instance, and all the sensors around us. And what are really the obstacles for developing software faster and in a more reliable way? Basically, it's because people are developing software using the same tools as in 20 years ago. I bet everybody here knows at least one person that uses the exact same tools from 20 years ago. right? And developing software is still only accessible for those who know how to program. So it's mysterious. It's a mysterious art for those who don't know how to program, and for those who do know how to program, is error prone. Every programmer introduces at least one bug a day in his code, in his code. And of course, it's a laborious art. It's specifying software, constructing, compiling, deploying, and going all over this loop again and again. So what is our vision? Our vision is that software construction needs to leave the manufacturing age and step into the automation age. We are not talking about 4.0, we're just talking about automation, because making software is still a handcraft nowadays. And software should be error-free. Why do we have bugs in our software? We do have tools around and techniques that allow us to produce software without bugs. And of course, we need to democratize software. We need everybody to be able to build some kind of software. We know that many domain experts know exactly what kind of software they need, they just don't know how to do it. So the last point is software doesn't stay still. So we need to update software every now and then, every day mainly. And many of the bugs, many of the errors, many of the security problems are introduced by updates. So you change the code that was lying around and you introduce an error. So we have been working on these topics for quite some time, and it all started, we can identify the start of this in the Interfaces project back in 2009 that had Cutting Mellon as a partner, had also Lazige as a partner, and a company called OutSystems that I'm sure you all know. So this project talked about the interaction of components, how to modularize it, and to define properties that would be maintained across those modules to enforce, for instance, security properties. We then had a national project called CLAY that talks about live programming, how to change a system while it's running without stopping it, without downtime. So the purpose is to build an environment that allows such systems to be built and maintained. And then we have an internal research line inside Novalinks that researchers from all research areas in the center collaborate to the common goal. We also participated in Radicalize, a project by OutSystems. So we also participated as consultants in this project, and we now have a RISE project to be able to develop more these ideas. So just focusing on the collaboration that we have with OutSystems, because we want to have real impact on software development. We have been collaborating for quite some time with lots of good results and collaborative research that really brings knowledge from industry and knowledge from academia together. So let me just highlight a few research results we already had, and then point to some future developments. We started, as I said before, by enforcing security properties on software. So we've developed a system that dynamically enforces declaratively specified security policies. So security policies could be just specified by someone without the knowledge of the details of the code and just saying who can do what to what data. And the system, in this case, it was a prototype in the OutSystems platform, would generate the code necessary to enforce those policies. So this was one of the big results of the Interfaces project with Cutting Mellon, OutSystems, and Lazige. And deeper knowledge came from that work into static verification of of security policies. So we were able to integrate in a compiler-like tool the verification of these security policies. So we can check for these policies even before the system is put into production. So like a compiler, you have an error. You cannot deploy such a system because it will have problems at runtime. And so these two were about security, to produce code, application systems that don't break the security policies that you need to have a secure system. But we also want everybody to be able to interact with the system. And many of the situations in development is how to manipulate data and show data to users. So we have worked also on data manipulation languages that would abstract the details of having different kinds of databases in different kind of locations, because we nowadays want to combine data from the cloud, from our cell phone, from, well, whatever. And this is hard. So we have worked on languages that make this all seem easy. And also, there are many things that are encoded in our systems that have to be brought from the user intents, the user stories as we call it, to code. And there's a transformation here where data simply disappears. We are working now on transforming those user stories into processes formally defined in a system, and those processes then defined, transformed into applications. So in an automated way. Oops. So in conclusion, our live programming paradigm targets at aiding development by smart code automation. So we need smart tools to empower the users to make secure and reliable software. So letting experts transform the intents of users into formal specifications, and then formal specifications into code in an automated way, and of course allowing systems to be modified again maintaining the properties that the systems work correctly. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much. Oops.
Questions, please? Yes, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. I just have a question.
Sure.
So the changes that you would do in the code, would they be just to prevent bugs in the code, or is the system also applying for, like, sometimes you have two choices to do the same thing in a code, and one is more effective than the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Is your program changing to the more effective way too, or just preventing bugs?
So the idea is not to change the code automatically, but to generate code automatically. So let the user specify what the user wants. So it's not to guess the code, right? It's just to generate the code from a higher level specification. In that case, it's a challenge to produce the more efficient one. Yes, but
Okay, thank you.
More questions?
Thank you for this very interesting talk. I'd like to ask, connecting to the talk before you, how could you use your automated software generator to increase the security of specific systems?
the security is a global property. It works if the system works and the software works. We see many times that the systems have vulnerabilities and then the software was okay, but it was attacked. So everything, and the other way around also works, also happens. So the system works perfectly, it's protected with every cybersecurity measure, but then there's a mistake from a programmer that uncovers some data that it shouldn't. So everything has to be combined. I agree with Miguel from that everything must work together to produce one single and secure system. the idea how these two interact is again a challenge, because sometimes, well, many times, applications assume things about the system, and systems assume things about assume things about the application. And there are some research initiatives that want to provide secure development from the applications to the microcode of processors. So, and that's the way. Everything has to be integrated. Those frontiers had to be studied. And
this means that your type of software could automatically search for vulnerabilities in the system and then also automatically generate software to cover them?
Not exactly. The development tool will prevent the developer from writing invalid code.
Yes, and this so this make breaches in the system.
Yes, in a way. Yes.
So in a way, if this process is automated, that
yes, it approximates to the properties that the systems want from the applications, and of course, if the systems, the supporting systems have the cybersecurity measures in place, the application won't compromise it.
Thank you.
There on my right side.
Thank you for the presentation. The idea of live programming is extremely interesting. Can you summarize the main challenges of doing it? Because it's not an unusual thing, right?
Well, the main challenge is, I would say, it is to maintain synchronization between data and code, state, because code is static, but it becomes alive when it's connected to data, right? So how to minimize downtime when you change the code, when you change the structure of the data is the main challenge.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hello. My name is Carlos Costa. I'm from QuidGest. My question is, do you have an exclusive partnership with OutSystems, or are you open to other kind of platforms? Because we are working on these subjects for 30 years now, in what we call a different level, which is a model-driven approach, not just code automation, but model-driven approach.
Yes.
And it will be very interesting to partnership with you in order to develop this kind of
well, we're open to discuss everything.
Thank you.
So you are in a way for a world where software will be mostly automated, error-free and accessible to common users. That's a wonderful world approaching. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we move to the last communication by João Leite from Nova Laboratory for Computer Science and Informatics on artificial intelligence beyond deep learning. Welcome.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is João Leite. I come from Nova Links, the Nova Laboratory for Computer Science and Informatics. As I'm sure you've heard about it, artificial intelligence is nowadays perhaps one of the most relevant and talked about, perhaps overhyped technologies we are seeing. And this is mostly happening because of the influence and the doors opened by neural networks and learning techniques which have made it quite popular. However, despite this recent success and this recent hype, artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time. Actually, it's been around basically since the beginning of computer science. Some will argue that even before the beginning of computer science. From its very beginning and until very recently, basically most of artificial intelligence was based on the concept of knowledge. Basically, it assumed the existence of a way to represent knowledge, and then it was mostly about finding the most adequate way to represent knowledge and the most efficient algorithms to automate such reasoning, or the reasoning that you need in order to develop certain applications. And from this vast history of artificial intelligence, many developments made their way into real-world applications. For example, planning and scheduling systems, which are now so widespread in many applications that few consider them to be artificial intelligence. You also see one of the results of this early dawn of artificial intelligence, declarative programming, for example, and more recently, a focus on representing and reasoning on the web within this enterprise of the semantic web, of which one of the fundamental results was linked open data, which basically fostered the development of many knowledge bases, which are open, which are linked, which are available on the web, and allow us basically to reason on just about any domain. For any domain you can think about, there's surely going to be some ontology out there that you can use as the basis for your reasoning. But these early developments of artificial intelligence, mostly based on knowledge representation and reasoning, have not exhausted this area of research. More recently, the trend has shifted towards adapting and bringing this knowledge representation and reasoning technologies to be able to deal with more real-world problems. For example, you can see a focus on reasoning and dealing with dynamic aspects of the world so that these applications and these knowledge representation technologies are able to deal with changes in the world. Also, this idea of hybrid reasoning, whereby you need to combine different forms of knowledge representations. For example, you may have a database, you may have an ontology, you may have a bunch of rules, and you need to jointly reason with all this together. Also, there's a shift in dealing or moving from certain definite knowledge representation rules and ontologies to knowledge representation technologies that are able to deal with uncertainty and inconsistency. And finally, there's also a shift towards integrating, because of cyber-physical systems, integrating this more logical side, more discrete side of systems with a more continuous one, usually described by differential equations. So as you can see, some of the trends that we are looking at in this area of knowledge representation and reasoning, they essentially deal with combining the traditional knowledge representation technologies with other theories to make it into the real world and be able to be used in real world applications. However, there's one fundamental problem with this kind of technologies that has not been solved until today, at least not within the realm of knowledge representation and reasoning, and that is the problem of perception. It is still an open problem, or actually an impossibility, to, within this realm of knowledge representation and reasoning, to be able to deal with perception problems, the kinds of things that for us humans are quite simple. Recognize a face, for example, drive a car. These are the kinds of things that knowledge representation and reasoning or knowledge-based systems have always struggled with. And this is where neural networks and machine learning have come into play. Believe it or not, at least for those not directly acquainted with the area of computer science, you'd probably be surprised that most of the technologies associated with neural networks and machine learning, they've been around for quite some time. For example, the mathematical model of the neuron has been here since 1943. Even the basis of the most fundamental learning algorithm for neural networks has been here since the mid-70s, early 80s. But the boom that made artificial neural networks and machine learning to the news happened some 10 years ago, and it is mostly due to the increasing availability of computational power on the one hand and of huge data. Yes, because in order for this to work, you need a lot of computational power and you need a lot of data, okay? But the good thing is that with this kind of systems, you were finally able to solve this long-standing problem in artificial intelligence, which was to be able to deal with perception. And if you think about a real-world AI application, perception is always going to be one fundamental key aspect of that. And of course, once this was solved, the rest, you've seen it in the news. From a computer system that was able to win at Go when everybody thought it would take at least another 30 years for that to happen, from computers that now read medical scans better than the best doctors, self-driving cars, cybersecurity, actually you name it, everything, everyone is looking for a piece of AI. Taking on my distinguished colleague of the previous talk that was saying that everybody wants an app, I would say everybody now wants AI on their system, even sometimes not knowing exactly what AI is all about. Okay? However, neural networks are not perfect. In particular, neural networks do not understand and cannot explain what they are doing. Okay? If you ask AlphaGo, the system that was brilliant at playing Go, if you ask it why it did a particular move, of course it's not going to be able to explain why it did that move. Actually, it doesn't even know it's playing Go. Okay? It's just able to output what the next move should be. And if you think a human being that plays Go certainly is going to excel at chess or checkers or any other more mundane activities, but not AlphaGo. AlphaGo plays Go, it doesn't know how to play anything else. If you want it to play chess, you have to train it from scratch, but then it won't know how to play Go anymore, okay? And this lack of understanding, this lack of semantics, or this lack of being able to reason and explain its actions, it's one of the fundamental problems of artificial neural networks and of deep learning. So on the one side, you have these knowledge-based classic systems with logic and symbolic manipulation based on rules and ontologies, which are great at solving high-level abstract problems, but they usually have high complexity, but they are good at explaining the results. On the other side, you have these systems based on cognitive science and neuroscience, basically artificial neural networks. They're great at pattern recognition and perception. They require large volumes of data, but their results are not explainable. And even though many associate nowadays artificial intelligence with artificial neural networks and machine learning, actually, I would argue, as many working in artificial intelligence would do, that in order to have true artificial intelligence, you need perception, but you also need knowledge, and you also need reasoning. And actually, this has been kind of the holy grail of AI ever since the beginning of this discipline. How can you combine perception, knowledge, and reasoning, which in the present moment actually means how can you combine neural networks and knowledge-based systems. There are some recent approaches that have tackled this. For example, some of them are called the fibrine neural networks, which handpick and design a particular neural network in order to be able to mimic some sort of reasoning, but then it loses all its abstraction capabilities, which are at the heart of what neural networks are good for. You also have other ways to look just at the input and output of a neural network in order to create input-output relations so that you can arguably, or at least to some extent, be able to say exactly, or not exactly, but to some extent, why that output happened, but not any sort of the kind of justification that we humans are seeking. However, despite this holy grail of once being able to integrate all these dimensions that are required for artificial intelligence, there's one pressing need at the moment, and it's the idea of explainable AI. As AI is making its way into our lives, it's quite obvious that we need these systems to explain what they're doing. Actually, there's even regulations like the GDPR, which are already giving some guarantees to the humans that the decisions should be explainable, okay? And it's towards this goal, towards being able to some extent begin explaining what's going on in artificial intelligence, that we've taken a couple of steps recently, trying to leverage on the one side with all the ontologies that exist, not least because of that initiative I mentioned of linked open data, but also of neural networks, and try to combine both. So in the last 30 seconds that I have, let me just tell you what we are kind of working on. Basically, so if you take some neural network that someone trained, let's imagine that it's just taking a picture and deciding or whether whatever is seen in the picture is healthy or not. So our goal or our idea is to go to the linked open data and try to pick an ontology. If one isn't there, you can always design an ontology about the topic that the neural network has been designed for. Okay, so for example, here I could have an ontology describing characteristics of fruit and that fruit is healthy, for example, so on and so forth. And what we are looking at is to look inside the neural network. And this is the novelty here. And to follow some quite interesting, but I have no time to explain them now, methods in order to group and pick certain neurons in order to map to certain concepts. And what we are seeing is that we need a lot fewer examples to train, to classify these particular concepts from the ontology. But the interesting thing is once you have some of these concepts mapped to the ontology, then you can do logical reasoning in the ontology in order to create an explanation, which is a logical reasoning that would go from the observed characteristics in order to the explanation. And of course, then you can take these axioms from the ontology and generate the natural language explanation for it, okay? So we are not solving the entire problem. It's just one step in order to try to come up with some notion of an explanation or a justification for the behavior of a neural network, leveraging on the ontologies that are out there. And I think I've exhausted my time, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much indeed for so challenging a presentation. Comments, questions? I'm not an expert, but I retain your observation on neural networks do not understand what they are doing. That's kind of, could you comment on that?
Well, because they don't. Essentially, if you think about a neural network, it's just an interconnection of small functions, if you wish, and the output of one function is going to be part of the input of the subsequent function. And these functions have some weights on the inputs, which are trained by a mechanism, by an algorithm, which essentially tries to minimize the error on the outside. So at the end of the day, what you have is all these interconnected synapses that connect all these so-called neurons, which are functions. But at the end, all you have is a bunch of weights, okay? And with these weights, all you have, you can say, here's the matrix of all my weights, but that's hardly meaningful to any human being.
Any further question? You have 1 minute left in your time, so if you want to add up something, you have no time to underline.
Well, I can.
One last statement.
Yes, I can say that this is actually just one part of an international trend that we are seeing at the moment. If you look at what's going on in AI conferences, even recently in this CLARE initiative, which is this a network of research centers in Europe that has been formed about a year ago, what you see is most everyone really identifying this combination of neural-based AI and knowledge and reasoning-based AI as perhaps the most fundamental open challenge and problem in AI. So this is one step towards this greater goal that seems to be the key research question in basic research in artificial intelligence.
Thank you. No last question? Being so, thank you. Thank you all for your brilliant contribution.